Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Jonathan Lynn's Clue from 1985. So yes, here we are back again, and this time something a little bit different from the James Bond, kind of content here, and that of course will come, as I've said, over time, a lot more gradually than I thought, previously. But yeah, this is something different from these James Bond reviews, or just content, and the like. Here we are with this film, Clue, and a non-spoilers review here. Don't worry if you haven't seen this film. Of course, I will not be getting into kind of plot details in the way that they will, reveal too much. In that sense, it's going to be more of a brief review and just kind of outlining my thoughts on this film, and of course just discussing this film. I'm not going to get into it too much. I think that would be only possible really, if this kind of film actually on a rewatch, to actually give a more in-depth kind of discussion here, and definitely open to that, if I feel that's necessary in the future. But for now, it's just a basic kind of discussion here, and it's something I really want to talk about actually. And yes, this film, Clue, of course, John Landis as well is involved in this film. He, credited for the story, alongside Lynn, and yes, this screenplay as well. So yes, this is something that got me very interested for that reason. The cast as well. Christopher Lloyd, Tim Curry, being such, members here. Big fan. These actors, especially Christopher Lloyd. But Tim Curry is one of the main, the main characters here. And yes, it's a film that I've heard about for many years. In terms of, people saying this is a great film. But we must say, it is a cult film more than anything, really. It's a more of a kind of you could say one of the more popular cult films, but it is a cult film. Nevertheless, it's not kind of this big famous film that done really well. And stuff at the time, of course, the box office didn't do well. It's not actually very acclaimed at all. In fact, and the critics were quite negative towards this film. Actually, it's not, you could say actually it's kind of panned at times. So this got me really interested, because I hear so much great things about this from certain circles, in the film community, certain people that I follow and stuff. I do see some really positive things about this film. So I thought, I really wanted to see this, and yes, I watched it last night, Thursday night, and to call this an underrated film, underappreciated film, I think it's a real understatement. This film, I absolutely loved it, and I think this is a truly great film. I just, from the opening shots, really, I was just there. I was in this experience, and I just connected to this film so much. It's just one of my type of films here. Great comedy film, mystery thriller, kind of a whodunit maybe, but it's more than that, and it's this, of course, the basic outline, and it is of course based off of the board game. 49, I think, the official kind of date for that release of that. The board game, of course, Cluedo, aka Clue, which is known, in the US and stuff. So that's why, the film is called Clue. But that's a board game, of course, very famous. So this film is based off of that, and the setting in this film, though, is 54, and yes, many of these 6 guests, invited to this mansion, which is in New England, and it's basically in the middle of nowhere. It's a very remote location. And then you've got the butler, Wadsworth. He's played by Tim Curry, and you've also got this maid played by Colleen Camp. This French maid. But yes, this film has these guests arriving, of course, and some of them kind of come into contact actually before they get to the mansion. It's just a really a classic setup here. I loved even the opening parts, and Tim Curry returning to this, or him arriving to the mansion as well, was just already in there. It was just great comedy, and I love the intro. I love the kind of the slight glimmers of outside, and the weather and stuff, and seeing this mansion, the way it's presented, it's mysterious, but for a number of reasons, it is of course comedic, even in this kind of reveal, and one of the things being the music used here, and yes, this is just such a unique experience. Once they're in there, of course, you very soon find out that the kind of the butler Wadsworth, aka Tim Curry, reveals this to the guests, that they're there for a blackmailer. This character of Mr. Body, he's the one who has been blackmailing them, and yes, that's revealed very early on, and it all unfolds from there. It's kind of this character study, the kind of the nature of truth, perhaps. Yes, this film, without spoiling too much, that is, this film really, after that, initial kind of setup, it just all unfolds from there, and we have a very, very short film, but such a kind of unforgettable film, and I love, when done well, films kind of set in the one location really, and just there's something about that can really make for some of the best films really. Rear Window probably being the greatest, just off the top of my head, the greatest kind of one location film really, and I think so. And there's so many that I love. Rope, and Hitchcock, and various films. But yes, Hitchcock comes to mind. Of course, whenever we kind of talk about thrillers, most of the time you could say Hitchcock, of course, comes into the mind. And I think this film here, Clue, is really, really just, it takes loads of classic elements here, applies them to this film, but at the same time it's very, very different. It's very unique, particularly in the way it approaches the comedy. But it's such a genius film at times here, actually, and I don't think it's quite a perfect film, but that doesn't really matter, because I think it's an absolutely brilliant film, and certainly among my favourite comedies really. I just absolutely love this, and I think really, it's not too much of a surprise actually. There's something about this film, from the images, just from hearing about this, and just kind of hearing about the the kind of the genre and stuff, and knowing that this is these different actors in the film, Christopher Lloyd and stuff, and just seeing some stuff about this, reading up on this a little bit before this this watch, just something about it, just kind of. I thought, this is probably going to be a film that I really really like, at least, and I just had this feeling, that I could potentially just really love this film, and it definitely is a film that I love. I had a great time with this. You've got so many great characters. Colonel Mustard, as well. Of course, Christopher Lloyd plays Professor Plum. You've got so many great characters here. The cook as well. You've got all these different memorable side characters. This cop as well that comes into it later on, and you've got so many different characters here that are just so great. In the film, and a perfect kind of pretty much a perfect. Kind of mix of different personalities, and it smartly keeps the kind of the intrigue of these characters right up until the end. It's definitely a film that kind of explores paranoia as well, and this kind of in this tight location wonderfully. And it's a film that, yes, it's a comedy, but like great comedies, they're also kind of something else. I think actually there's a lot more under the surface here, and it can be viewed as just a highly energetic and just such a controlled comedy, but it can also be kind of interpreted as just a really quite a powerful human drama actually, and something that is exploring characters here, and you never, as I say, you don't learn everything about the characters, but it's just enough to kind of keep you invested. At least it did for me, and as I say, I think this film is really, really great. The way the film is shot, I loved. The editing is just so great. It really takes a lot, to kind of to edit a film like this, so that pretty much every single line of comedy lands just so wonderfully. And I think there's a couple flaws. I'll say that just from my liking. I think Mr. Body is someone who I think could have been better. He was probably my least favourite character in the film, and there's some moments with him that I didn't enjoy as much, and just there's just a couple of moments around them parts maybe early on that I didn't think were kind of masterful, perhaps, or maybe not too great, but I think overall this is pretty much it's not far off of being you know, a masterpiece in my eyes. I think that's how good it is for me. You know, I think yes, you know, that may be a divisive kind of view on the film. I know it's very panned at times, but there are, you know, there is a cult following. I just happen to be one of those people really on this occasion. I think, you know, I would definitely say that this film is underrated. You know, just underappreciated. I think I urge, you know, anyone you know, who kind of likes classic you know, thrillers and just comedies, of course. You know, just these kinds of films, you know, to kind of check this one out if you haven't done already. You know, of course, I think the performances, you know, mostly, you know, are great in this film, and just, you know, Christopher Lloyd and Tim Curry are my favourites in this film. Let me tell you, and this is the same year, of course, Back to the Future. So Christopher Lloyd, you know, had a great year here, you know, for films, and you know, this film is just so great, and I think these, you know, the cast here is just so great. You know, other than maybe the casting, of course, of Mr. Body, I think the rest of the cast here is so. It's a film that really just comes together so wonderfully. You know, in all these elements, and I think direction here is really just so good. And other than a few moments here and there, I think everything really, you know, works in that sense. A couple of things don't quite reach this kind of level for this film to be, you know, kind of considered a masterpiece by me, but it's not far off. You know, I think it's just a few things for my liking that aren't quite there, perhaps. But regardless, it's definitely, you know, going to go on my favourite films list. I really loved this film, you know, so much. It's such a charming film. You know, it's got this innocence about it, and Tim Curry, you know, for me, you know, is the standout. You know, if you kind of are asking, you know, kind of what do you think is the best and the kind of the most enjoyable performance, it's definitely Tim Curry for me. I think he really, you know, he is on fire here. You know, this is possibly, you know, his best, you know, kind of role that I've seen actually, and you know, I think he's, you know, he's a great actor. You know, even, you know, the miniseries of It, you know, he really, you know, is one of the best things about that film. You know, well, it's not a film, it's a miniseries, but you know, that kind of that work there, that adaptation. But you know, Tim Curry, just in general, is a highly enjoyable actor, and I think he really is definitely in his element here. You know, it's a film that doesn't go too far. You know, mostly it's a film that really keeps it contained. You know, there's such a control in the direction, and of course the writing as well. You know, that's definitely one of the things I think that really you know, works pretty much perfectly actually, is the writing. You know, John Landis working on this with Jonathan Lynn, and I think, you know, this is really one of the best, you know, certainly among the best comedy kind of scripts, you know, out there actually, and I think really possibly, you know, this is a film that I'm quite surprised, you know, isn't kind of selected more as kind of you know, one of the best scripts, you know, and some of the maybe studied perhaps, you know, in that sense, you know, kind of a film that, you know, the script is such a kind of a great one that I think, yes, it's weird that it's kind of not as respected, this film. You know, I certainly am quite surprised at, you know, how this film, you know, one, didn't do too well at the box office, but two, is not kind of as respected, you know, by the critics perhaps, you know, in that sense. But you know, that's just obviously everyone, you know, responds differently to films. But you know, this is a real, you know, film here that's very intriguing in the kind of response to it, you know, because I think it really is a classic, you know, kind of thriller comedy here, mystery, the location, of course, the way that these characters, you know, interact, and the kind of the bumbling nature of the characters, perhaps at times, the innocence, the kind of humanity that's coming through from these characters. You know, there's always something going on, you know, underneath that kind of intrigues, you know, compels me throughout the film, and visually it's just, it's not too much, you know, it's not, you know, film with different moments that kind of, you know, downplay the comedy and its subtlety. You know, it really works and kind of just serves, you know, the script actually. You know, it's not a film that goes too far with the comedy, and it's a one that really slowly, gradually reveals more and more, you know, in terms of different locations in the mansion, you know, the characters, you know, splitting up, you know, etc. And yeah, just seeing more and more as the film goes on. Just a stunning, stunning film, and I think this is a highly enjoyable comedy thriller, and I think it's an absolutely stunning, stunning film. I would call it great. You know, I think I'm definitely, you know, definitely on the side. You know, that this is a classic film. This is one that really is among my favourite comedies, to be quite honest, and just so enjoyable. You know, really from the get go. I love the kind of location, the atmosphere. You know, it does not kind of lose this atmosphere because it's a comedy. It really feels like this kind of, you know, on edge, mysterious thriller, and yes, it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it knows, you know, it really knows how it's not taking itself seriously so precisely that it just works. And actually, in the end, you know, I do think I was highly invested, and that's what a great comedy, you know, film does. That is balancing out different genres. That is kind of, you know, trying to keep you immersed in this kind of mystery, this plot, and I think this film is just so great. And yes, not far off being, you know, a masterpiece. Actually, for me, not quite there overall. There's a couple of things. Mr. Body, as I say, you know, just some moments early on of comedy, and just moments and involving him, around him, and just a few things that don't quite, you know, go to the extra mile kind of category in that sense, and just doesn't quite you know, kind of speak to me, you know, personally as a masterpiece. As I say, very close in many regards, and only a few percentage really off, you know, of this kind of mark that I would give it. And yes, if you haven't seen this film, highly recommend it. And for me, a truly great film. So yes, overall, you know, I love this film so much. What a charming, unique, you know, just atmospheric and really wonderful experience this film is. You know, I can't wait to rewatch it, and you know, maybe then I can't rule it out. You know, I could, you know, give a more in-depth kind of spoiler-filled review. But for now, you know, I must say that if you haven't seen this film, check it out. You know, it gets my recommendation, and I think it's not quite a masterpiece for me, but that doesn't really matter at all. You know, I think this is such a wonderful film, and yes, taking everything into account, you know, I think I'd have to give this film an extremely high rating of a 95, 5%, yes indeed. And you know, this film, yes, that's an extremely high score for me. You know, I know, but I have to say, this film is just so enjoyable. It's so well made, and I think the comic timing, you know, the way that the film unravels, reveals itself, you know, in such a kind of controlled way, mostly, pretty much always throughout. You know, this is controlled so precisely. The tone of the film, but again, it feels kind of loose and you know, relaxed in some of these elements. So it's not kind of, it's just a unique, you know, kind of experience here. It's something that does not take itself too seriously, but it really kind of reveals itself more and more. You know, it's just this actually quite deep and you know, human film. You know, in the end, and I think it really satisfies me in many regards in this kind of location and you know, the kind of atmosphere and the tone of the film. It really is something very unique, highly charming, and just quite a wonderful film actually, and certainly going to be on my favourite films list. I can't say where, but it's among my favourite comedies, that's for sure. And I think the script, you know, the editing, wow, the way the film in general was shot, you know, to kind of for what it is, you know, contained comedy. It really is, you know, really great cinematography as well, and the direction, you know, just in general is really something else. And I think it's such a realised film, this, and you know, I just think very few flaws. You know, I think it's just a great comedy, great thriller, great mystery, and you know, I think it's just kind of this classic feeling that I just love so much, and at the same time very unique, and it's doing something that's very bold. Just these performances, you know, as I've said, are just so great. The casting here, you know, Lesley Ann Warren, of course, Colleen, Eileen, Brennan, you know, Christopher Lloyd, of course, you know, yes, Tim Curry, wow, just so great in this film, and I just love the energy of this film, particularly, you know, Tim Curry. It's probably the, you know, the character that kind of represents this this just energetic feeling that just constantly kind of enthralls me really throughout. It's just one of them films. I can't really look at it and say how I would dislike this film. It's just so enjoyable. For my tastes. I think, and it just really just appeals to me. Maybe it's not for everyone, of course, but yes, because it is a divisive film. But I certainly am behind this in full support, and hopefully, if you haven't seen this film, you would at least check it out. And it has my recommendation. Of course, and leave your thoughts in the comments. I love this film, and it'd be great to hear what you think of the film. Of course, and everyone has different opinions. That's absolutely fine, and it'd be great to just hear your thoughts on this one, because it's as well not too seen really in the grand scheme of things. But more and more people are checking this one out, and I'm certainly glad that I finally did. It's just a great film, full of atmosphere, full of charm, the comedy. Of course, it's a hilarious film in my opinion, and just full of great characters, and wonderful kind of use of location and details, to kind of allow everything to come together really. And it's got kind of ambiguous moments, but it is just a highly enjoyable film, throughout, and just really, it's a human comedy. It really is, and wonderful mystery thriller, atmospheric film. So yes, I love this film. Certainly a great experience, in my opinion, and yes, just a highly recommendable film here, and I really loved it. I had a great time with this one, and yes, tell me your thoughts, as I say, and I look forward to viewing more films, including, of course, continuing, as I've said, going through the James Bond films, re-reviewing them. So that's something, of course, that's ongoing, and yes, just more and more films, like this that aren't particularly, Bond films, as I've said, and yes, as always, thanks for watching my review.